All right, so we're going to be looking at today, what we're going to be looking at is how to import other components into our model. More specifically, plumbing fixtures, furniture, cabinetry, and the question that might lie is where are these items located? Okay, so the first thing let's start out with is I'm going to go to my level 1 floor plan and let's look at some of the items that we're going to want to place inside of our model. If you go to the example of what the midterm submission is, you'll notice that you will need to create a detailed view of a bathroom. Okay, you're going to need to create a detailed view, and you're going to need to create an interior elevation of one of your bathroom walls. Okay, so what I would suggest to do to create that detailed view is if you go up to View, you're going to see the button that says Call Out. Okay, so if I click on Call Out, all you have to do is simply just draw a little, you're going to draw a box around the room that you're going to be working in. Okay, so for example, right here, go ahead and click, and we're going to select the little, let's see, we're going to select the little, what do we call this thing? This little bubble that shows us where the view is going to be located. You'll notice right now that all you have is a dash. Because you just have a dash right now, that's just telling you that you haven't put it onto a sheet yet. Okay, so in a few minutes we will look at we'll put that onto a sheet. But notice that by adding that detail view, that you now see that in your floor plans. You now have a level 1 call out. All right, so I could rename that, and maybe we call this level 1 bathroom. Okay, so we'll hit OK, and if we double click on that, now we just simply have a little detailed blow up of our bathroom space. All right, the scale of that is probably going to be, and I would check the midterm assignment just to see what that is. Actually, I'm going to guess that it's probably going to be like 1/2 inch is my guess. Okay, but when you actually bring it into your sheet, you'll have a better idea of what that might be. Let's actually trim the extents of our view. Okay, we don't really need all that extra view in our model. Okay, so we'll have something kind of like that. All right, so let's add some different bathroom fixtures to our bathroom. All right, so if we go up to Architecture and then we go over to Component, we can click on Place Component. All right, so by default we just have a couple options in here, all of which are completely useless to our project. We don't need to insert a 32 or a 40-foot construction trailer inside of our project, unless that's the look that you're going for. But we're going to go ahead and click on Edit Type, and we're going to go to Load. And you're now going to get a big old variety of objects that you can upload into your project. Okay, so if we're working on bathroom items, we're going to go down to where it says plumbing. Okay, so we're going to click on plumbing, and they're going to have 2 choices, architectural and MEP. Architectural will have more architectural related fixtures, okay, whereas MEP is going to be a lot of the fine details like piping and whatnot. Nothing all that exciting, but go through and look at it. There may be some objects in there that might be useful to your bathroom. All right, but for now I'm just going to go ahead and click on architectural, and then I'm going to click on fixtures, and you'll see from there it breaks it down to bathtubs, drains, drinking fountains, showers, etc. You'll have all kinds of different stuff. I'm going to start with bathtubs. Okay, and how you actually design your bathroom is completely up to you. You can spend as little or as much time as you want inside your bathroom. Okay, you could obviously easily spend an entire day probably detailing that bathroom. Whether or not you actually do that is up to you. What I'm really looking for is, fairly simple. Add a bathtub, add a toilet, and a sink and a mirror. Some of just the basic components. If you want to take it further than that, that is up to you. So I'm going to start with a bathtub. And it gives you a couple different options. All right, so tub rectangular 3D, that's an actual 3D tub. All right, and it gives you a little thumbnail over here on the right hand side of what that tub looks like. Remember a couple classes ago when we actually went on to, I believe, bimobject.com. If you don't like any of the objects that you see in here, Most of the Revit objects that you'll have to upload are very generic. There's nothing special about a majority of them. If you want something a little bit more specific, or maybe you want a nice designer tub inside your bathroom, go to a website like BIM Object and find the one that you want, and you would upload it the exact same way. Okay, so you'll probably be able to find much nicer fixtures if you actually want to spend a few minutes doing that. But as I mentioned earlier, the Revit objects are okay as well. I don't know if you'll actually do like a perspective of your bathroom. You might. But if you're not doing a perspective of the space, I probably wouldn't invest time into putting really nice fixtures inside it, because nobody will ever see it. You're just going to see it in plan or elevation. But for now, let's see. Let's just pick one of these. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick freestanding 3D. Okay, so I'm going to open that up. It will load it into my project, and I will place it in my space. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Something about like that. I now have a tub inside my bathroom. Okay, so next let's insert a toilet. So it's gonna be the same process. You're going to go up to Place Component, Edit Type, Load, and we will go to Plumbing, Architectural, Fixtures, and we're going to go to Water Closets. All right, so we're gonna go to Water Closets. Why they can't just put toilets? Like why do they have to change the term? I don't know. And I'll just pick probably the generic domestic. That's just your basic domestic toilet. Open, and you can change the materials if you'd like to do that. I'll hit OK, and I will place that back of that toilet right up against the back. I guess that would be the retaining wall. That's actually what you're actually seeing in there. And then lastly, let's go ahead and add a sink and a countertop. To find the countertop, or to find actually the cabinetry, you're going to be looking in a little bit different of a location. All right, so if I go to Component, Place Component, and Edit, Load, instead of going over to Plumbing, you're going to go over to, let's see, I'm looking for it, Casework. Okay, so right under Cable Tray, you'll see a folder that says Casework. That's where you're going to find all of your cabinetry. This will be where you find the cabinetry for your bathrooms and for your kitchen. Okay, so if you click on Casework, you'll notice that you have base cabinets. That's going to be where your sink would sit on. That would be the cabinets that will be below your countertops inside of your kitchen. Okay, so those are all base cabinets. And then you have countertops, which will be the actual big countertops that will go on top of the base cabinets. Then you have shelving. You have tall cabinets and wall cabinets. Tall cabinets are going to be like floor to ceiling cabinets, and wall cabinets will be like what you have in your kitchen above your sink. Okay, so your high cabinets. So feel free to go through there and find the ones that you want. But for my bathroom, I'm going to click on base cabinets, hit open, and I'm just going to look for a very basic vanity for my bathroom. Actually, I take that back. This is actually not what I want for my bathroom. This is all kitchen cabinets. Okay, so if you go over to, let's go back actually to plumbing. Now that I think about it, let's go to plumbing, architectural, fixtures, and let's go to sinks. I think a lot of these will actually come
with the come.
I think right here. Nope, sink, vanity. All right, we're getting closer. Sometimes you got to do a little digging, and we'll find it. Equipment. Nope, that's not what I want. Might be under, let's see, there's one under here called Furniture Systems as well. Is that it? Nope, that's not what I want. Sorry. We're going to dig for a sec. May have to come back to this one. Furniture. Should be under Casework. Huh. Let's try countertops. Let's try countertops. So we're getting closer. All right, we could actually use one of our base cabinets. Let's just go back to that. Let's just go down that route. I know somewhere in the depths of this humongous Revit system. There is actually a vanity that you can actually choose. But let's just go to base cabinets. We'll just pick a basic one for our kitchen or for our bathroom. That looks fine. Let's hit open, and we will drop that in. Maybe we put it right up against our wall. All right, so, and then we can go over to the same process. I'm gonna start going a little bit faster. And let's see, Casework. Let's go to countertops, and we're going to find a countertop with a sinkhole in it. Okay, that looks good. That's just a basic vanity countertop with a round sinkhole. All right, notice that it's a little bit bigger than actually what we need. I'm going to start by just centering this like so, and I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller by just dragging the extents of the countertop. The other option would be to just simply make the base cabinet a little bit bigger if that's a look that you're going for. All right, so we now have a countertop. The countertop by default should come in at the right height at your typical ADA accessible countertop height. All right, so you shouldn't have to worry about knowing where that countertop is coming in. And lastly, I will come over and I will put a sink in. So place component, load, and I will go over back to plumbing, fixtures, sinks, and let's pick just a nice little, let's see, round, there we go, round sink. And we'll drop that in, something kind of like that. All right, so I'm going to, kind of wondering why I'm actually not seeing, why am I not seeing my sink? Let's actually look at this in 3D. So I'm going to go over and I'm going to do a 3D view camera. I'm just going to look at my sink so I can kind of see what's going on in this space. So let's see, this is actually a little bit too tall. Notice that the sink is actually embedded in our countertop, so I was actually wrong. This is not in the correct location. This is not in the correct location. Let's bring this up a couple inches. Let's go to sink location, length. You know what? To better actually move this stuff up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my interior elevation. So from that same detail callout, I'm going to go up to elevation, and I'm going to, as soon as it wants to give me my, let's go back to level 1. Come on, give me my little marker. Oh, I know why I can't see it, because we actually have them turned off inside of our visibility graphics. So if we go to visibility graphics, annotations, I would bet elevations is probably yep, just like that. So hit OK. Now I'll be able to see those, and I can add my interior elevation. Okay, so just like that. I don't need to see it in my overall floor plan, so I'm going to hide that here. But in my level 1 bathroom, I do want to see that. Okay, so let's go back and let's unhide it here again. Elevations. Okay, so there's my little elevation tag. Just going to kind of bring it back a little bit. If I click on the little triangle, I can see the extents of where my elevation is shown. Notice that it automatically makes the extents the width of the room. Okay, so you shouldn't really have to update that at all. Okay, if I zoom back out, I can actually make the depth of my view just right up to about the wall. That's good. I don't need to see anything outside of that. So let's double click on that head, and we can now see our bathroom elevation. We can see that we have a window inside. You can see our cabinetry. So here's my vanity and my counter. So I'm just going to simply grab that, and I'm going to drag that to the top of my cabinetry. Okay, and notice that actually that did not go up by itself. I thought it would. Going to bring my sink up to match my top of my countertop, just like that, and that should be good. Okay, so that's pretty much all that I'm expecting for the elevation inside the bathroom. If you want to go through and you can add a mirror, there's plenty of other little things if you want to add some shelving and all that stuff. that's completely up to you to how much you want to do. The main goal for me is just knowing that you know how to set up the detail view, how to set up the interior elevation, and how to place some of the fixtures, okay? All right, so that's going to be how to create our detail view, how to create our interior elevations, and how to add some of those plumbing fixtures. So when you actually go back to your level 1 floor plan and you actually start to detail the rest of your space, go through and add a bed, add all of the typical kind of items that will help identify these as bedrooms, okay? Keep in mind that if you just submit something that looks like this and it doesn't have kind of the appropriate furniture in it, it's kind of hard for people to kind of understand, what rooms are which. So when you add things like furniture, it makes the rooms easily identifiable. Okay, I can look at that and say that's obviously a bedroom. I could see the beds in there, and there's closets, and it all makes sense. Okay, add a washer and a dryer inside one of the cabinets. If you go up to architecture component, you'll notice that there's a ton of furniture in here. Okay, so if you can go over to furniture, you'll notice that there's beds, seating, storage, there's tables, there's TVs. All of the things that you really need to place inside of your space are available to you. And again, you can go to also like bimobject.com if you want to get specific types of furniture, okay? If you want to put furniture in your house that you actually can find in the store, that's where you would find it. You can go over to bimobject.com, okay? So that'll be where you find all of your furniture, all right? So they have all of the typical kind of your basic couches and chairs, sofa, okay? You could put a sofa in here. You can click on that sofa. You can make it as small or as large as you want. So I'll let you guys determine the location of where all of that stuff will be. So you can play designer and determine all of those items, okay? All right, any questions? Yeah?
How did you create the section view, the detailed view of the callout?
Right here. So if you go up to view and you click on callout, all right, so for example, let's say...
In elevation, I have the callout.
Okay, but you don't have the interior elevation? Right. Is what you're saying?
Right.
So if you go over to view and you click on elevation, you'll get your little elevation tag, all right? And if you notice that if you move your mouse around to the inside of the interior spaces, it's trying to basically guess what elevation you're trying to create, okay? And if you're not seeing this, if you're not seeing that little tag, you most likely need to go to your visibility graphics and turn on your elevation tags, okay? That's probably why you're not seeing it. Okay? Any other questions before we move on to the next step? All right, so the next thing that we're going to look at is we're going to create our fireplace, okay? So right now, a lot of you probably have this void inside of your wall right here, okay? That void is going to be for our fireplace, all right? I'm just gonna get rid of this couch right now because it's just a little distracting. And let's go through the different processes of creating the fireplace. So if you look at this in 3D view, you can kind of see the opening of where our fireplace is gonna go, all right? So back to level 1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to architecture, I'm going to go to component, and I'm going to click on model in place, okay? And I'm going to go to generic models, all right? And let's call this fireplace. And I'm going to hit OK. So remember when we talked about generic models a couple classes ago, when you're creating a generic model, all you're doing is you're simply breaking down the object that you're creating into its most simplest forms, okay? So if you think about a fireplace, what are kind of the basic forms of a fireplace, okay? So if you're looking at it inside, you might have, looking at this in like perspective, okay? So if I'm drawing this in like 3D, you might have a fireplace that looks kind of like this. Maybe it goes back a little bit. Maybe you have an opening of your fireplace that looks kind of like that. Okay, you have your logs inside. Okay, so you have your log inside, then you have your fire, etc. You might have like a mantle. Okay, might have a mantle that extends out. okay? So you might have something like that, but it's pretty simple, okay? How you actually detail your fireplace is up to you. You can add as much, kind of as much dimension and as much, if you want to put a bunch of things on it to accentuate the fireplace, by all means go for it. But the point is to break it down into its simplest forms, and pretty much what you're breaking it down to is into a couple extruded rectangles. Okay, that's about really all the fireplace is. Okay, so let's create that. So I'm going to first start out by clicking on Extrusion. Okay, so click on Extrusion, and I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to define the extents of the first portion of my fireplace. Okay, so I want it to kind of stick out of my building a little bit. Okay, and I want it to also be inside of my interior. So maybe I'm just kind of eyeballing this to what it might look like, but maybe it looks about something kind of like that. Okay. And right now, if you look over at the left under your properties, you'll notice that it says extrusion start 0 feet and extrusion end 1 feet. So if I click on the check mark here, that extrusion is only going to be a foot tall. That's okay for now because I actually don't know how tall I want this fireplace to be. I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark, and I'm going to go to my 3D view, and I'm actually just going to grab that extrusion, and I'm going to bring it all the way up to the top, and I'm going to let it basically join to that wall. Okay, if you actually want it a little bit bigger, you may even consider, I think the actual 3D view actually shows it all the way up to that window. Actually, proportionally, I actually kind of like the way that looks a little bit better, and I'm actually going to bring it all the way up to the window. Okay, if you want to actually go through and edit the perimeter of your wall so that opening is the actual width of the fireplace, you can. Now that I've covered it up, I won't even see it, but if you're going to do it correctly, you would adjust the wall so that you have that entire opening. But I'm just gonna skip through that process right now. Okay, so that's kind of our basic geometry of the fireplace. Okay, now let's add a couple more elements. All right, let's add maybe a chimney. Okay, we need a way for the smoke to exit our fireplace. So again, I'm going to go over to create. I'm going to create extrusion, and I'm going to set my reference plane by picking a plane, and I'm going to select the top of my fireplace. Okay, so I'm going to select the top of that so that now when I'm drawing, that I'm drawing on the top of that fireplace. Okay, and I'm not drawing at the level I originally created the base of the fireplace at. Okay, so again, thinking about kind of the basic forms of the chimney, we're basically just creating an extruded circle. Okay, we're going to create a cylinder. All right, so maybe we create something about, maybe it's about like that. All right, we'll place it kind of at about the correct location. Let's put it in the middle. It's probably a better location. And I'm going to hit check mark again. So it's only a foot tall right now, but maybe we actually bring it all the way up. Maybe it goes through the roof. No. Yeah, it probably wants to go through the roof because we don't want smoke kind of bellowing up underneath our roof. So it'll be something kind of like that. Okay. All right, so now we're kind of getting there. We're still missing a few different components. We're still kind of missing a place to where our logs would sit. All right, so if we go to the interior, I'm going to go back to my level 1, and I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to go over to void forms. Okay, so if I go to void forms, I'm going to click on void extrusion. All right, and I'm going to create a void form about where I want that opening in my fireplace to be. So it'd be something about like that, just kind of eyeballing it. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark. Now right now I can't actually see where that opening is. Okay, I need a better vantage point so I could see that better. So for now I'm actually just going to hit check. All right, and I'm going to go back to my 3D view, and I'm going to use my section box tool. I know we probably all forget about this just wonderful tool, but if I go to my section box, let's drag this back. Whoops, cancel. Click on my section box. Let's drag this back so I can better see the interior of my space. Ah, there we go. Now I can see the interior of my space. I'm going to click on my my generic model one more time. I'm going to go to edit and place so I can continue to make edits. So here's my void extrusion. Okay, notice that that extrusion is actually cutting out of my original extrusion. Okay, that was not a void extrusion. So I'm just going to drag this up to where I want it to be. Okay, so maybe it's something about kind of like that. And if I back out and I click, you'll notice that I have a nice little opening of where that fireplace might be. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'll go ahead and run with that. We'll use that. All right. Let's create one more piece to our fireplace just to give it a little bit more depth. Let's add a little mantle for it. Okay, so going back to my level 1, I can now go through. I'm going to go to create again, just creating an extrusion. All right, I'm going to create another extrusion and let's give it a mantle. All right, so maybe it sticks out about 8 inches. That's about right. Maybe we let it overhang. Maybe let it overhang the side. Yeah, something kind of like that. All right, again, just kind of eyeballing it. I'm going to go ahead and hit check. And going back to my 3D view, I can go through and adjust some of these sizes of these extrusions. Okay, so maybe it's something kind of like that. All right. And lastly, so we kind of have the basic shape of it. It's a very basic fireplace, nothing too special about this. But what are we kind of missing right now? What could we add to this fireplace that would give it a lot more? Texture. Yeah, absolutely. We need to add some texture to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the original extrusion, and notice that if you go through and you click on all the different extrusions except for the void, you can add a material to them. Okay, so you can add a different material to every extrusion that you create. Okay, so I'm going to start by creating a material for the actual fireplace. And maybe we make this like brick, maybe you make it stone, up to you. All right, so I'm going to call this fireplace material, appearance. Remember this little shortcut. All right, let's find something that works kind of good. I'll just use brick for now. It's right here, it's easily accessible. So I'm going to go ahead and go to open, hit OK. So right now the brick is super tiny. Remember, we have to change the scale of that. All right, so we're going to click on the image of that. We know that these 10 bricks are not going to be 1 foot tall. I think I've calculated this before. I think it's actually like 44 inches. So for height, I'm just going to change that to 44. That should be good. And we'll hit OK. That looks much better. That's kind of the scale that we're looking for. Now you could probably go on to like bimobject.com. You could probably find some logs. You could probably even generic model a couple logs if you really want to. Although, you know, it might be kind of hard to kind of get the texture of a log doing a generic model. You're probably better off just downloading something that's already created. All right, so you can continue to add additional detail to this if you want to. I'm going to go through here, and you can add some detail to the little ledge. Maybe you make that wood. I'm not going to do it right now. I don't want you guys to have to watch me, you know, detail every little component. You could add a material to this. Maybe that's like aluminum or something like that, some kind of a metal. And you know, obviously, the more and more materials you add to this, the more, you know, the better off your renderings are going to look later on down the road. Okay, so that's just going to be our basic fireplace. Okay, and if you wanted to add like a TV above that, you can do that as well. You can there's a couple TVs you can pick inside Revit. You can also go and you can download a nice Samsung TV if you want to. So up to you. Have some fun with this portion of the project. It's kind of cool to be able to go and play interior designer for the rest of the day. All right, so now that I'm done with my fireplace, I'm going to go ahead and hit the check mark, and we're going to call that a wrap with the fireplace. Any questions for the generic models? Any questions at all? Now, after we finish the residence project, we are going to look at a few more capabilities of the generic models. If you go over to architecture, let's just actually look at a couple of them really quickly. I'm not going to show you how to use them, but let's look at our other options. So if you go to generic models, okay, you'll notice that other than just extrusion, you have blend, revolve, sweep. You have a couple of those other different options. We'll look at a couple of those in a few weeks, okay? So just a few other options on to kind of get some more complex shapes for our generic models, okay? So you'll run into some times when just a basic extrusion won't really do what you want to do. So we'll look at those another day. All right, so that looks good. I'm gonna click on my section box, bring this back out here so I could see my original building. And I can go back over to my properties and I can turn that section box off. All right. Any questions about generic models? Good. All right, so it's about 11:40. Let's move on. Now we're going to look at how to create landscape, okay? We're gonna look at how to create topography, all right? So if we go to our level 1 floor plan, actually, let's go to our site plan. All right, we're kind of seeing, let's look at this from the top of our project, okay? I'm gonna start by turning off the elevation tags. I don't wanna see those are a little distracting. Let's see, annotations, did I pass it? There we go, elevations, we'll turn those off. And that looks pretty good. Everything else on here is fairly relevant. So if we go back over to Canvas, let's look at part 9 of the residence. Okay, so if we go to Topo Surface, if you go to part 9, it's going to show you all of the different points that we're going to be creating. Okay, is anybody familiar with how a topography map works? Does everyone have kind of a basic idea of how topography maps work? Okay, so looking at this here, basically each one of these lines in the topography map represents a unit of elevation. Okay, so for example, this line right here represents 10 feet above grade. Okay, this line right here represents 9 feet, 8 feet, 7 feet, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, etc. And every one of these lines represents 1 foot of grade change. Okay, so when we start with our first line, we start 10 feet above grade, and if we go all the way down to the other side, we have minus 5 feet below grade. Okay, so you can count every one of these lines and you will notice that it works out. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, which is represented by the dark black line. All right, that's a grade in your project. Ideally, you want that to be about where your door is, right? So entering the project, you want to make sure that if you're walking up that you can actually get inside your house. And then we go -1, -2, -3, -4, -5, okay? So that's kind of the basic understanding of how a topography map works, okay? So depending, if you take a glance at a topography map, when you see these lines that are really close, that's just telling you that there's a big elevation change, a quick elevation change too. When they're really drawn out, that's telling you that there's a very subtle and gradual elevation change on the topography map. So, if you want to kind of get a better idea of what some of these look like, just Google topography map. Like you can look at like a mountain range and you'll notice like lines that are so close that they're practically touching. That's because there's just basically a drop down descent. There's a cliff basically. Okay, so you can see some pretty cool topography maps out there. All right, so let's actually learn how to create them. All right, so let's go back over to Revit. If we go over back to Massing and Site, we're going to click on Topo Surface. All right, so we're going to click on Topo Surface. Let's go ahead and save this. And I'm actually going to save this as part 7 and part 8, or I'm sorry, part 8 and part 9. Okay, so now that we've clicked on Topo Surface, this opens up this other little dialog box, okay? And you only have a couple different options. You have Place Point and you have Create from Import. We're gonna work with Place Point, but I'll just briefly explain how Create from Import works. If by chance you're working with like, for example, maybe like you're a civil engineer, well, they would probably give you a topo file, okay? Because that's what they do, all right? So they probably have a topography map of all of the projects that they work on. So my civil engineer would send me a topography file. It's just simply a CAD file. I would upload that, or I would click on Create from Import, select the Topo CAD file, and it will just create the topography surface for you. So it's kind of a nice little feature. We don't have that, that luxury for this project. So we're gonna click on Place Point, all right? We're gonna click on Place Point, and we're gonna now move down to the ribbon that's just below that, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna first define the elevation that you wanna start with, okay? So if you go back to our file, I would recommend either starting on this side or starting on this side. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna place a bunch of points to define where we want these elevation lines, okay? So you don't actually have to draw each and every one of these. So you could just draw the ones that are shown, but if you actually draw every line, you'll be able to be a little bit more precise because you can actually define their locations. And once you get good at it, you'll draw those lines super quickly, okay? The most important part is to kind of think about, and you'll have a better understanding of where the topography kind of meets the building in certain locations. Once you're done, you'll probably have to go through, click on the topography and edit it at a later point because you're gonna realize that the topography is like 2 feet below your door or something like that. So you'll need to go in there and actually kind of adjust the points as necessary, okay? But get a couple of visuals. We know that we're gonna want 8 feet at about, actually it looks like 7 feet is about where it meets this little kind of wraparound patio area on the left side, okay? So get a couple of visuals of where some of those elements might be, okay? So let's go back to Revit, and I'm gonna create my first point at 10 feet, all right? And looking at that little map, I know that the 7-foot line is gonna be right about in this area, okay? All right, so the actual goal is to be able to just walk right onto this little patio from this little hillside. So we're gonna start out at 10 feet. I'm just gonna kind of create an arbitrary, you know, I'm gonna basically, I'm gonna create a boundary. I don't need to create the topography 200 yards away from my building. You know, kind of pick kind of an area that's maybe, 40 or 50 feet beyond your building. So I'm gonna start maybe right around this area. And we're at 10 feet. I'm just gonna define a couple points, okay? It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. All right, so something kind of about like that. So all of those dots are gonna be at the 10-foot elevation, okay? So now I can change that elevation to 9 feet. All right, and I'm going to draw another line. Okay, so that's gonna be my 9-foot elevation. And again, I'm gonna do 8 feet. And that's going to be somewhere even a little bit closer. So maybe we go down somewhere over here. And now we can do 7 feet. And we know that about where that wants to be. So I'm going to put that right about at the edge of my walkway. Okay, so maybe we go about right there. And we will continue that like so. All right, so going back over, we can now see that we have a pretty gradual, or we have a pretty steep ascent here. So we're gonna need to go down all the way to 3 feet within a relatively quick time. Getting this perfect is not really, it doesn't, there's probably 100 different ways you can get this to look and it'll still look just fine. So don't worry about trying to get every one of these little jogs exactly correct. Not a big deal. As long as you can kind of eyeball it and get it correct, that's the most important part. All right, so we need to get down to 3 feet. So let's go to 6. And we'll draw this line relatively close. All right, we can go to 5. All right, draw a couple of those points. And we're gonna go to 4. I think it does something kind of like that. And then finally 3. All right, and then let's go back and look at our prompt. Now we can do kind of a more gradual descent all the way down to -5. All right, so I'm just gonna do this pretty quickly. We'll go 2. We'll go 1. And 0. Maybe 0 is right at the back of our little patio, okay? So that's actually our little landing. All right, so now I'm actually going to skip the rest. I'm going to go to -5. I'm not going to draw all of them. I'm just going to go all the way about to where I think -5 should be. All right, and even though you don't see them, they are actually there. I think the reason why you actually don't see all of the other lines is because the view depth is not quite enough. I don't think the view depth goes below 0 currently, but I know they're there. So I'm going to go up. As soon as I'm done with that, I'm going to hit the check mark. And we can go up in 3D, and you can see your topography. Okay? So you can kind of see how that works. Notice how our topography over here basically is actually pretty darn close to lining up with that step. Okay, so I could go back and I could click on this and click on Edit, and go back to my site plan, and I could change. I could click on these dots, and I can even raise them, a foot or 6 inches or whatever it needs to happen to get that topography to line up right up against that. So I can click on this, and maybe we make this 7 feet 8 inches. Okay, 7 feet 8. That's probably pretty good. Check. Okay, so wow, yep, we're pretty close. We're about, we're probably a couple inches away from that being nice and level. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Although right now my patio is actually covered. Okay, so in a few minutes I'll go through and I'll actually lower that line just a little bit so my patio is not covered. But overall, that's the result that we're looking for. Okay, right now it's all dirt. All right, so if we click on the Topo Surface, I can go through and I can add a material. All right, so if you don't want it to be dirt and maybe you want it to be grass, we can create, there might already be one available. Let's see, it doesn't look like it, so let's create one. We'll go ahead and call this grass. And we're gonna go up to appearance. Of course, that's not where I wanna be. Our little fun little shortcut. That's actually where I want to be. And we'll go back to grass. And we're going to go down to, I believe, earthwork. I think earthwork is A, B, C, D, E. Oh, maybe it's not earthwork. Let's see.
Site work.
Oh, site work. That's what it was. Yeah, thank you. So we'll go down to S. There it was. Oh, there we go. We got about 15 different types of grass. I know, we all love grass. Don't spend 45 minutes picking grass. Just kidding, I know you're not going to do that. But, we all love Kentucky bluegrass, Augustine grass. Doesn't really matter. It's actually kind of funny that there's so many different types of grass in Revit. But maybe you just love a particular type of grass. So I'll pick that one. Hit OK. You could add a bump. You could add a bump to give it some 3D texture when you do a rendering if you want. So you click on bump, go to site work, and I think it's that one right there. Hit open. All right, hit OK, and now we have grass. Okay, so now we're starting to get some. We kind of have like a ground plane to our building. Okay, it's not really floating in space. Okay, so a couple more things before we move on is notice that our grass is actually coming through our building right now. Okay, so how do we fix that? Well, what we're going to need to do, and you would typically actually do this probably in the initial phase, probably one of the first things that you really do. But what fixes that is creating a building pad. Okay, so a building pad is very similar to like a floor, but a floor actually has material properties and all that stuff. A building pad is basically just creating a slab. Okay, you're creating it's a foundation element to your building. So if you go up to structure, let's see, is it right here? Actually, oh no, it's actually in massing and site. Sorry, if you go to massing and site, you can click on building pad. And it's saying the work plane cannot be used for this operation. We actually will need to go over to a flat work plane like level 1. So if we go over to building pad, we can now, just like a floor, it's no different. You're just going to outline the location of your building pad. And what that will do is it will cut out a section in the topography for where that building pad will be, okay? So I can really quickly just outline the outer perimeter of my building. Okay, so wherever my, I think my patio is somewhere about right there. Now your patio could probably actually be your building pad if you really wanted it to be. But basically, when we're all done, it's going to look just like look just like a floor, but it's just going to be like however many inches of concrete you want it to be. All right, so pad 1 looks good. This is going to be on level 1. That's what we want. Go ahead and hit the check mark. And if we go back now, notice that in our floor plan that we don't actually see any of that topography anymore. Notice that the topography comes right up to the edge of the building and it stops, okay? That's because the building pad cut out of the topography. So if we go back to our 3D view, you will now notice that the topography does not go through your building, all right? So the only problem now is that the building pad is kind of clashing with our first floor, okay? So I wanna select that. If you were actually doing construction, you would probably actually create your lower level using the building pad, and then you would just create a floor that's just the material, because you know a lot of our houses probably are on like foundations or whatever. But if by chance you have like a slab on grade condition, you would just put your you'd put your wood floor right on top of the slab, right? So if you want to, you can do that. You can move the pad down. We'll say, if you just move it down an inch, it will fix that problem of the overlapping. And you could select your floor and you could make your floor whatever the thickness of just the material is, and that material could sit right on top of the slab. So up to you and how you want to handle that. But if you notice the slab clashing with your floor, the quick fix is just to lower it 1 inch, okay? Because ideally you want the finished floor, the actual top of whatever you're finished to be, is actually at 0, okay? The slab may actually be an inch or 2 below that. All right? That looks pretty good. So now that we have this, let's go back and look at our elevations, okay? I'm just gonna show you guys how to clean up your elevations a little bit. So if we go over to, first say, let's see what the north is. Let's look at this north elevation. Ideally, I don't really want to see all of this stuff right here. You typically in an elevation, you don't see below grade, right? You don't actually see all the earthwork, all right? So if we go over to our crop view, show crop region, and we click on our crop region, first of all, let's make this a little bit bigger. We actually have more of our building that we're not seeing. All right, so if I go to my crop view, I can click on that crop region, and I can go over to edit crop, and now I have a boundary line very similar to what we had when we're creating like a floor, okay? So I can actually modify this building line. Maybe we make, I usually like to put it about right where the topography is, okay? So maybe it's about like that. Probably actually wants to be a little bit lower than where the topography is, okay? We're gonna come up about like that to where our entry is, close it off. Delete this bottom line. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit the check mark, and notice that now we're not really seeing a majority of that topography. To actually get rid of the topography, you're gonna wanna go to your visibility graphics and just actually hide it, okay? Because you don't need to see it in your elevations.
Is it there?
Yep. So under topography, we'll go ahead and just do that, and voila. All right. So you can move these out a little bit, but that would be kind of a, a nice little elevation. I don't mind seeing the topography a little bit. I just don't want to see a massive amount of topography, especially if it's blocking a lot of your building. You got to realize that your cut plane. So for example, if I go back over to oops, that's my ceiling plan. If I go back to my level 1 and I look at where my cut plane is for the north elevation, it's actually cutting the topography at that point. So the topography may actually be changing from here to here. So it might actually kind of mess up your elevation a little bit. That's why I prefer just to kind of hide it. Okay? So So questions about topography, questions about setting up your elevations at all? That's just a little tip, you know, hopefully that will help you clean that up a little bit. So before we go to lunch, let's look at one more thing. I'm gonna go back to my site plan here. All right, and we're gonna look at how to create a sub-region within our topography, okay? So if you go over to the instructions, you're gonna notice down at the very bottom that we're gonna create a sub-region for our driveway, okay? That's basically the overall look that we're looking to have, okay? So a car would pull up, that's probably like gravel or it's some kind of a paved surface. But what we're doing is we're creating a sub-region to which we can change the material in the topography, okay? So going back over to the topo, I'm going to click on sub-region, and I'm going to simply outline, and I give you some dimensions. If you click on, where'd it go? I give you some dimensions that you can use. All right, so 34 by 22. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it really quickly. I think it's about like this. All right, so be something kind of like that, okay? This would probably actually go all the way to the edge. All right, so now we have a sub-region. So if we go back up to our 3D region, or I'm sorry, our 3D view, I can now click on that sub-region and I can give it a different material. So I can add a new material. Maybe we create one for gravel or pavement or something like that. Concrete, sure. I'm just going to call this pavement for now. Appearance. I think it's also under site work. Let's see. And gravel's fine. Let's see. That's grass. That's fine. That'll work. Nice loose gravel. Hit OK. And now we have a different material that starts to define where our driveway is going to be, okay? So you can go through and you can add a car there if you wanted to. There's plenty of cars that you can download. There's a couple inside Revit as well. Unfortunately, I think they gave you a VW van and a Volkswagen Beetle. Those are the only options. They thought these are the two cars that people love, and we're going to put them inside the program. So that's just a good little basic run through on how to do topography. That should get you through both exercises 8 and 9. When we go to lunch, we're going to go to lunch right now. When we come back, I will go over again how to set up renderings, okay? So you guys can move through that portion of the project. And if I have a few extra minutes, I'll tackle a couple more of those bullet points on my topics to cover. Yeah?
This driveway we just add, it just the elevation of it, just follow the topography plan, or we do?
Yeah, if you guys want to do something a little bit different, that's fine. But just keep in mind that it's kind of set up to work with the levels that we've created since the very beginning. But you know, if you want a big hill over here or something like that, that's fine. You can experiment with that. But you know, the way that it shows on the assignment prompt actually allows you to, one, kind of get onto your patio at this location, and to also get onto your patio at the bottom of the location. So the points that are on the exercise prompt are, you know, they're carefully chosen. Okay. One more quick thing that just you may want to do for fun is if you go over to massing and site, you also have an option for site component. Okay, so you can click on site component, go to edit type, load, and you can go over to plantings. Okay, so you click on plantings and you'll have a bunch of different options for shrubs, trees, tropical plants like, you know, palm trees, you know, there's all kinds of stuff. But if you click on tropical, for example, it should upload a bunch of tropical type plants. Okay, if you want other different types of trees, you can go through and upload, you know, here's tropical trees, and now I have a bunch of different palms. Okay, so I can hit OK, And let's find a nice big, here's a big palm right here. I can go through and I can click and that will place it onto my topography. But if you want to put some plants or whatever around your building and maybe do a little landscaping, by all means, do that. All right. Keep in mind though that when you place trees in a rendering, it drastically increases your rendering time. Okay, just because the more objects you add to your scene, the longer your rendering time is going to be. And trees, for whatever reason, they just add a lot of rendering time. If you're using the Autodesk Cloud for your rendering service, it probably won't slow it down too much because you're using just a massive computer somewhere off in Autodesk world in Silicon Valley. So it probably won't affect you too much, but it adds a nice little, little scenery to your renderings. So I'll let you guys determine what it is that you want to do for that. Okay, any questions at all before we go to lunch? Good? We're all probably pretty hungry. All right, let's go ahead and go to lunch. Let's come back at 12:45 and then we'll do a couple more things and I'll let you guys loose.